Hey, what's going on? It's Riffy. I am back again. We're in the cardiovascular system unit. Here's how this unit's going to work. We're going to run through some blood vessels type stuff. We're going to start talking about the heart, the structures of the heart, how it's arranged, how the electrical system of the heart works. We're going to get into blood, what components are made of blood, how to type blood, all this great stuff. But before we do, I have to show you this YouTube video um, that it was just sent to me. I just got to show you guys. It's random. It is what it is. So here you go.
Hey guys, today I'm going to be talking to you about this subliminal message I found on the YouTube logo thingy. Yeah, it's pretty funny, but also kind of scary. So I just thought I'd have to let people know about this. It's kind of creepy. Alright, so when you look at the logo, as you can see, with the U and the tube, where that says tube on it is completely in red. It's kind of shaped like this big red rectangle around it. So, but the rest of it isn't, and underneath it in gray is broadcasting itself. So right now I'm just trying to point out the obvious so that you know, like just so you know, because it's easier. But okay, so here you go. Now when you look.
Okay, so I won't lie to you. That was strictly a point to kind of trick you into accelerating your heart rate, feeling your heart pounding within your chest. Scaring was the best way I could do it. Hopefully, you're okay. But what we need you to realize is if there were any two systems that really are relied upon by all the other systems. We've talked about the nervous system being one. The cardiovascular system is going to be the next one. So let's get into this bad boy. So if you take your cardiovascular system as a whole, you can divide that into two divisions. You have what's called the pulmonary circuit, which is going to carry blood to and from the lungs. And then you have the systemic circuit, which carries blood to and from the entire body. But no matter what, the term circuit means it's kind of cyclical, or it has an exact route that it passes through every single time, and that's literally how your circulatory system works. Blood that returns from the systemic circuit, so that is blood that is coming from the body and the cells, has to complete the pulmonary circuit before it can go back to the body. The function of this is going to become fairly obvious here in a second, but it all has to do with gas exchange, really and truly. So let's kind of take a look at how this is organized real quick.
Blood circulates through the body in two main routes. The systemic circulation transports oxygenated blood to the tissues and brings deoxygenated blood back to the right side of the heart. The pulmonary circulation transports deoxygenated blood to the lungs and brings freshly oxygenated blood back to the left side of the heart. The coronary system is the portion of the systemic circulation that perfuses the heart muscle.
Now, if you notice in that video, they had actually a third circuit involved in there, which is called the coronary circuit. We'll get into that later, but if you take as the body as a whole, you really have the entire body divided into two circuits. You have, like I said, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. Something I really liked about that diagram, something that is brought up here, is you notice that no matter what, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit both have a deoxygenated section and an oxygenated section. So it's important to understand that in both of them, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit, you get gas exchange to occur. But it's the opposite gas exchanges between the two. So as blood leaves the heart on its way to the body and traveling through the systemic circuit, you'll notice that it's high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide until it reaches the cells of the body. In that exact moment, you will find that oxygen is going to leave the blood and carbon dioxide is going to be picked up. Well, then that now becomes a situation in which we have low oxygen and high carbon dioxide. But we have to get rid of that carbon dioxide because it's a waste product, but we also need oxygen because it's a necessary nutrient for our cells. So once that occurs, it enters back into the heart and gets pumped to the lungs where gas exchange occurs yet again. Oxygen this time, however, comes into the blood and carbon dioxide then leaves, and that repeats itself over and over and over again. Another picture that I really like is this same thing, but it's a little bit more anatomically correct. It shows that both circuits completing each other And something that I really like about this one is you see how there's a mixture of red and blue. That's an indication of a gas exchange. Like when you mix red and blue, you get purple. So that is kind of the gray area that you would call it, or the purple area, where the oxygen is going into the body cells and the carbon dioxide is leaving. Up here, it's the opposite. The carbon dioxide is leaving the body through the lungs, and oxygen is coming into the blood through the lungs. So, of both of those systems, you'll notice that whenever blood leaves or enters the heart, they typically are doing so in very, very large vessels, which we'll get into all this here in just a little while. But if you take those vessels, you basically have two types. You have arteries and you have veins, and then you have small branches of those two categories. An artery is always going to be a vessel that is carrying blood away from the heart. You have to ignore the fact that typically arteries will be carrying highly oxygenated blood, but that is not the defining characteristic of an artery. Arteries are going to be those that carry blood away from the heart, and it doesn't always have to be oxygenated because we have the pulmonary arteries which leave the heart and go to the lungs. It has a lot of carbon dioxide and very low oxygen. And then you have veins. Veins are always going to be vessels that carry blood to the heart. That means that typically they're going to be associated with blood that is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide, but it's not always the case. Again, pulmonary veins carry blood from the lungs to the heart, but it's highly oxygenated. Really and truly though, the pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins are your only two exceptions to that low oxygen, low carbon dioxide, high carbon dioxide rule. If you take an artery, like I said, that it carries blood away from the heart, you can break those down. They typically will start as a very large artery and then branch out. That first section of branches are called arterioles. They're small arteries that connect then to the capillaries. Capillaries are the connection point between arteries and veins. Once that blood becomes highly deoxygenated and high amounts of carbon dioxide, it then starts leading back to the heart, and from capillary they turn into venules, which are small veins, and then those venules then turn directly into larger blood vessels called veins, which carry blood to the heart. Now, from the body leading to the heart, the two largest veins that you're going to have in the body are going to be the superior and inferior vena cava, which those two dump directly into the right atrium of the heart for pumping blood back to the lungs for gas exchange.
There are three main kinds of blood vessels: arteries.
Now, they did say three main kinds. Keep in mind that they're not going to go through all of the small branches of each an artery and a vein, like arterioles and venules.
Capillaries, and veins. Arteries are large blood vessels that carry blood from your heart to the rest of your body. This blood is rich in oxygen and nutrients. As arteries get farther away from the heart, they begin to branch and become smaller and smaller. The smallest branches are called capillaries. And this is where the oxygen in your blood is transferred to your tissues. In exchange, the wastes from your cells, including carbon dioxide, are transferred into the blood. Just beyond this area, the capillaries begin to merge together and eventually form larger vessels called veins, which lead back to the heart. As the vessels carry deoxygenated blood back to the heart, waste products are routed to other organs, where they are removed for disposal. As the deoxygenated blood makes its way back through the heart and lungs, it picks up oxygen and nutrients. The heart then pumps the blood out through the arteries, and the cycle is repeated.
That's why it's called a circuit. Okay, so if we move a little bit further, and when I show you two pictures, this is essentially all the arteries and arterioles in the body. You will notice that there are some very large ones. Your heart would sit right here. So the one that is going to be coming directly out, that is in fact the largest and it's the thickest, that is going to be your aorta. And the aorta is going to branch. It's going to have the brachiocephalic sections, and then it's also going to have the descending aorta. So really and truly, there's two sections, main large sections of the aorta. You have the ascending and the descending, but here's the descending aorta. You'll notice that it has two extremely large disconnects running off of there. Those two arteries right there are actually going to connect to the kidneys, and this also runs into the liver because the liver has a huge blood filtering system on top of the kidneys actually filtering that. And then it'll branch out into two branches for the legs, cutting down into the legs, and then what you'll end up seeing is you have a return system for veins, and it looks almost identical to the arteries. They almost mirror images because whatever goes to those sections obviously has to come back from those sections. When we talk about what the heart does itself, the heart is broken down into 4 chambers, and those 4 chambers have individual functions. Both atriums solely function to receive blood. The right atrium receives blood from the systemic circuit. So this is all the blood that's coming from your body dumping into the right atrium, and what it does is it takes that blood and pumps it down into the left ventricle. Alright, let's rewind that. All the blood in the right atrium dumps down into the right ventricle. When that right ventricle contracts, it pumps all the blood out of the heart and it travels to the lungs where gas exchange occurs. And then that blood returns to the heart from the lungs, dumping into the left atrium. Again, collecting blood from the pulmonary circuit, highly oxygenated low carbon dioxide, pumps that down into the left ventricle, where the left ventricle, being the thickest, the most muscular chamber of the heart, pumps blood out the heart into the aorta and distributing it throughout the entire body. That left ventricle, it's important to notice that it is much bigger, thicker, meatier than all the other chambers because its sole job is to pump blood to the entire rest of the body for distribution. So since that's a greater distance, it's going to require more force. In order to generate more force, you got to have more muscle. Alright, this is just a picture to kind of clarify what capillaries actually are. If you notice, you have your arterial and your venule here, and then it starts branching down. This entire section right here is going to be what's considered capillaries. Capillaries are the gray area where gas exchange occurs. When gas exchange occurs, you have the drop off of oxygen, the picking up of carbon dioxide, and boom, this venule will eventually turn into a vein, where that vein dumps into the heart, and the heart takes that blood to the lungs where the gas exchange occurs, and then the cycle repeats itself. Alright, so let's talk about the heart itself and kind of what's going on there. The heart is surrounded by what is called the pericardial cavity. You know this way from Unit 1, peri meaning around, cardio meaning heart, but it's got this membrane called the pericardium. So the pericardial cavity has the pericardium, which is a membrane that encompasses the heart. When you do your pig dissection, you'll notice that the heart almost looks like it's kind of like blurry looking when you first cut it into the pig and you see that heart. What that actually is, that is in fact the pericardial cavity and that pericardium or pericardial sac. That cavity in the membrane, the main function is really and truly to maintain the position of the heart, but also for protection and isolation from the surrounding environment. By protecting and isolating it, it needs to provide some kind of lubrication because the heart is always moving, always beating. You know that moving objects generate friction. Well, in order to reduce the friction and the damage to tissue, you have that membrane around there. That membrane's job is to provide a mucus or a lubricant fluid that actually allows it to lubricate the opposing surfaces, reducing friction. If you're looking at this would be your entire thoracic cavity, the entire thing here. And you, of course, remember from Unit 1, because you guys remember everything that I teach you, that the thoracic cavity can be broken down into 3 cavities. You have the left and the right pleural cavities, which contain the lungs, and then the pericardial cavity lies in between there, which contains the heart. So I think because of the symbol of the heart being positioned vertically with bilateral sides and equal sides, that it has this misconception that that's actually how it is positioned within your body. But really and truly, your heart is actually positioned directly behind your sternum, which, you know, you can be divided into 3 parts, including the xiphoid process, the manubrium, and the body. But it's also slightly to the left of your sternum. That's why we actually say the Pledge of Allegiance with our right hand over the left side of our chest, putting our hand over our heart. But it's positioned behind the sternum, slightly left. It's actually tilted and slanted so that the apex or the pointy section of the heart is actually pointed more towards your left arm than anything, not downwards towards your feet, but towards your left arm. And then actually, really and truly, the right side of the heart is slightly twisted forward. So when you're looking at somebody's chest, you will actually, if you had x-ray vision, you could see their heart. You would actually be seeing mostly the right side of their heart, whereas the left side's positioned a little bit more posterior. So here's what you're kind of looking at. So really and truly what we're looking at here is this is the right side of the heart up front, and the left side's going to be more towards the back. Here's that pericardium or the pericardial sac. And I like this picture because it actually shows you how the heart is really positioned in the body. If you notice, the point is more left, pointing towards the arm, the apex. And then this entire portion right here is really the right side of the heart. So your heart isn't positioned perfectly centered in your body with equal left and right halves. It's really more positioned center, slightly left, and the right and left side of the heart are really and truly on the front and back of the body. Surrounding the heart, and you'll remember this from the heart dissection, you'll notice they were kind of slimy when we did our dissection, but that heart itself actually has a high amount of adipose tissue on there. That adipose tissue, as it says here, provides all the biochemical compounds essential for cardiac function, but one of the biggest things it provides is the fatty acids necessary in order to generate ATP. So your heart uses quite a bit of that adipose tissue for generation of ATP and energy, so those cells can continually have that cellular energy so your heart can continue beating. Taking a look here, this is a sheep heart. We didn't dissect these, but we dissected pig hearts. Same thing. You notice all this yellow. That is all adipose tissue surrounding the outside portion of the heart. Again, used for biochemical compounds and energy. Also on the outer surface of the heart, you're going to notice that you have your third portion of the circulatory system called the coronary circulation. There are vessels that supply blood to the heart. Your heart is living tissue. Even though it has the chambers that have the blood in there, you have to know that you have to supply blood, oxygen-rich blood, and remove waste from there. And that can't all be done just within the chamber, so your heart actually has its own circulatory system. It can be divided into coronary arteries and coronary veins. You have essentially 4 very large arteries or veins in your heart, but the left and right coronary arteries are the big ones because these are the ones that typically will get clogged and you end up having what is called a coronary or a heart attack or a myocardial infarction. They start at the aorta and they branch away and they provide that nice oxygen-rich blood to the heart on left and right sides respectively. And then that blood is actually returned via the great and middle cardiac veins, and those cardiac veins meet at what is called the coronary sinus. Now the coronary sinus is on the back side of the right atrium, and that allows them to meet, and then there's a small opening in that right atrium for which all the coronary veins can dump that deoxygenated blood into the right atrium, and it can actually make its way through the circuit, the pulmonary circuit, and return back to the heart. So if you take a look at this picture, here's your left and right coronary arteries branching away from the aorta and supplying blood, oxygen-rich, to both sides of the heart. If you look at this, it kind of has both of them, but you also have, this is the coronary sinus right behind the right atrium. This is your inferior vena cava. This is your superior vena cava. So both of these cardiac veins dump into the coronary sinus, which dumps into this, and it completes the pulmonary circuit, dropping off carbon dioxide, picking up oxygen, and returning to the heart. Okay. So let's say, for instance, that your coronary arteries or coronary veins slowly over time, due to poor lifestyle choices, get a reduced flow. It's called an occlusion. Occlusions are usually caused by some kind of plaque buildup. Plaque buildup is usually caused by things like cholesterol, red blood cells, white blood cells that kind of form this clot, and that clot reduces the pathway for travel for blood. When that happens to a certain severity of occlusion, like a certain percentage of occlusion, that's when a heart attack occurs. Heart attack is also called a myocardial infarction. Let's watch a video on a heart attack.
This heart is pumping properly, moving oxygen-rich blood to every part of the body. Down the center, we see one of the coronary arteries, which supplies supplies blood to the muscles of the heart itself. A heart attack is caused when one of the coronary arteries is blocked. For instance, inside this coronary artery, a cholesterol plaque has formed. Platelets and red blood cells collect on the rough surface of that plaque, building a clot which will eventually block the artery. Once the artery is completely blocked, it no longer supplies oxygen to certain parts of the heart muscle. The lack of oxygen damages the heart muscle. The damaged muscle can't pump properly, causing a heart attack.
Boom, resulting in a heart attack. One of the big thing is, you gotta know, the coronary arteries are delivering oxygen-rich blood to your heart tissue. So when that happens, you can't deliver nutrients and oxygen-rich. Those cells are starved. They start to die. They cease to function. Boom, heart attack. Hold on, bud.
June's crying, and it actually says 73.
All right, I'll be out 1 second, okay? Sorry, guys. So you get a plaque buildup, reducing the flow, heart attack results. Severe cases of plaque buildup can actually end up with what's called arterial sclerosis, which is a hardening of the arteries, which is a severe case which actually damages and thins your blood vessel walls. That's when you can start having things that occur like embolisms or strokes. These are things that occur outside of the heart.